This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
According to an Israeli government spokeswoman, Israel's Army Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Dan Halutz, has resigned following an internal investigation into his role on the war on Lebanon last year. Halutz told Israel's Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, and his Defense Minister, Amir Peres, that he would resign provided that the investigation continues to take its normal course. Meanwhile, Israel's opposition blocs welcomed Halutz's resignation, calling for the resignation of Olmert and Peres as well.
أخيرا رضخ الجنرال حالوتس للدعوات المطالبة برحيله واستقال من منصبه. جاءت استقالته بعدما أشار التحقيق.
Finally, General Halutz bowed to pressure calling for his resignation. He called it quits. This news came after Halutz was held accountable for his country's shortcomings in its war on Lebanon following the abduction of 2 Israeli soldiers by Hezbollah in a cross-border raid on July 12, 2006. During its 34-day war, Israel intended to disarm Hezbollah and free its 2 soldiers. Halutz, who was then the head of Israel's Air Force, focused on heavy aerial bombardment against Hezbollah bases, failing to rely sufficiently on ground military operations. Israel failed to end cross-border rocket attacks by Hezbollah, which launched nearly 4,000 missiles during the war, and it also failed to free its kidnapped soldiers.
الذي أطلق نحو 4,000 صاروخ على إسرائيل ومن جهة أخرى أخفقت في تأمين الإفراج عن الجنديين. أمام هذا الواقع انطلقت حملة انتقادات عنيفة ضد الأسلوب.
Halutz was facing mounting criticism for the way he conducted the war, especially after he dispatched more military units to southern Lebanon just hours before the war was over, which resulted in the death of nearly 30 Israeli soldiers. Moreover, Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and his Defense Minister Amir Peres were also subjected to criticism for failing to stop Hezbollah's cross-border rocket attacks, which have killed nearly 160 Israelis and forced many residents to flee their towns and villages. The resignation of Halutz is expected to cause more shake-up for Ehud Olmert's government. Olmert is under criminal investigation by the Ministry of Justice for his role in the sale of one of Israel's largest government-owned banks to the private sector.
حول دوره في بيع أحد أكبر المصارف الإسرائيلية الحكومية إلى القطاع الخاص.
Meanwhile, Israel's Attorney General ordered a criminal investigation into the 2005 sale of Bank Leumi by Ehud Olmert to the private sector. Olmert is facing accusations that he was trying to help a businessman believed to be his close friend to take control over the second largest bank in Israel, an allegation that was strongly denied by Olmert.
We open with the resignation of IDF Chief of Staff Dan Halutz, which caught the Army, the public, and political leaders by surprise. Israel's top soldier finally gave in to the combined pressures of ongoing probes into the Lebanon war, open criticism from senior officers, a hostile defense minister, and loss of public confidence. Dennis Zinn reports.
The writing was on the wall, but the move still comes as a shock. This was the response of most IDF generals this morning following the resignation announcement of Chief of Staff Dan Halutz. Halutz tendered his letter of resignation to Prime Minister Ehud Olmert already on Sunday. Olmert tried to persuade the former air chief to remain in office and asked him to take a few days to reconsider. The two agreed on a total news blackout until Wednesday. The bombshell was released just after midnight last night. In his letter, the former Air Force commander did not take any specific responsibility for personal failures in the conduct of the Second Lebanon War. This despite wide-scale public pressure calling for his resignation since the start of the ceasefire on August the 14th, exactly 6 months ago. He did write that for him, the word responsibility is, quote, very significant, and that it is his concept of responsibility that led him to remain in office until now. Khalutz simply explained that the internal investigations are over and the 2007 work schedule has been approved, so the time is right to step aside. Critics of the Chief of Staff said Khalutz chose this point in time to make his move ahead of the announcement of the preliminary findings of the Vinograd Commission of Inquiry into the conduct of the war, scheduled for 2 weeks' time. Khalutz, they said, felt the noose closing around his neck. Defense Minister Amir Peretz was only informed of Khalutz's decision yesterday. At a meeting between the two this morning, Khalutz spelled out his reasons for resigning. Peretz did not try and persuade him to remain in office. Relations between the two were always strained, but especially so following the war. Dan Khalutz was military chief for less than 2 years, having assumed the post on June 1st, 2005. He was the first chief of staff to come from the Air Force, an appointment which sparked controversy in the military establishment. Many IDF veterans said Air Force officers do not have the skills necessary to run an entire army. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Reactions to the sudden resignation of Khalutz were quick to come from across the political spectrum. Political figures, mainly from the opposition, are calling on Defense Minister Amir Peretz and Prime Minister Ehud Olmert to follow the Chief of Staff's example and step down as well. Meretz Knesset member Zahava Galon said the failures of the Lebanon war did not stop at the military level and called on the political echelon, who accepted the, quote, irresponsible decision to go to war, to resign as soon as possible. This view was also echoed by Likud MK Gidon Saar, who said it doesn't make sense for the Chief of Staff to carry all the blame while his supervisors at the political level remain in their post. MK Ariel Aldad of the right-wing National Union National Religious Party claims it was a shame that Khalutz wasted 4 precious months needed to rehabilitate the IDF. Aldad urged Peretz and Olmert to step down since the whole country, he said, is in need of rehabilitation and cleansing. MK Ofer Pines Paz of Labor described the resignation as an unavoidable step that would hopefully pave the way to restoring confidence in the Army and the defense establishment. However, Pines Paz stressed the political echelon is not innocent of errors. Gilad Erdan of Likud urged the next Chief of Staff should not be appointed by the Prime Minister and Defense Minister, but by a government committee of experts. Reservists who demanded that the Chief of Staff step down from his position immediately after the war said today they will continue their struggle for the release of Israeli POWs. Many reservists gathered near the northern border this morning calling for the release of kidnapped soldiers Eldad Regev, Udi Goldwasser, and Gilad Shalit. The reservist also expressed the view that Khalutz bears responsibility as long as the abducted soldiers have not returned home. And a reaction from the terrorist organization responsible for starting the war. Hezbollah says the resignation of Lieutenant General Dan Khalutz is proof that they won last summer's conflict in Lebanon. The terror group claims that all those who participated in the war and were defeated will also be toppled like dominoes, including Defense Minister Amir Peretz and Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. Hezbollah said its strategy will become clearer and eventually Israel will fall. In other news, a criminal investigation has been opened into Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's role in the government's 2005 sale of the controlling interest in Bank Leumi. The state comptroller alleges that Olmert favored business associates during the sale when Olmert was finance minister. There's no immediate danger to the stability of Olmert's government, but coupled with today's resignation of Dan Khalutz, pressure is building for the prime minister to resign. IBA's Eli Wagelernter has more.
The Justice Ministry said a preliminary investigation by the state controller of the sale of Bank Leumi, quote, led to the conclusion that a foundation of evidence has been built that would justify opening a criminal investigation. If Prime Minister Olmert, who denies any wrongdoing in the case, is indicted, he would have to step down. But it could be months before a decision is made. The police anti-fraud unit must complete its investigation and then present the findings to Attorney General Menachem Azuz, who has the final say on whether to indict. Normally, only the Attorney General can order the investigation of a Prime Minister, but Mazuz recused himself from the case because his sister, Yemima Mazuz, was involved in the Leumi sale as the Finance Ministry's legal advisor. Prime Minister Olmert is not the first Prime Minister suspected of criminal activity. Indeed, he is the 4th Prime Minister in a row to face a criminal probe following Benjamin Netanyahu, Ehud Barak, and Ariel Sharon. An aide to Olmert said he was certain that nothing would come of this investigation, quote, just as nothing came of the investigations against previous prime ministers. This is just the latest in an ongoing series of investigations into various financial deals and political appointments involving Olmert. But the investigation itself does not mean that the prime minister has to step down.
According to law, the prime minister can go on in his position, and I believe he will go on, but he will go to the police for the investigation like any other citizen. This is part of our rule of law.
The announcement of the investigation was met with gleeful voices from across the political spectrum. Candidates for the Labour Party leadership, as well as the heads of other political parties, called on Olmert to resign and expressed hope that the probe would hasten the next general election. Meretz leader Yossi Beilin said that if Olmert did not suspend himself and let Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni take over, Meretz would work in the Knesset to force Olmert to do so.
Something is happening between Syria and Israel behind closed doors. The fact that so many details have been released about months of secret talks between the two countries leads one to believe that something must have happened. Israel did not deny these secret negotiations, but has refrained from confirming that they did occur despite what has been reported by Haaretz newspaper. Although Israeli spokesmen decided to keep it quiet, they did say that there were no meetings between Israeli and Syrian officials. It seems that Israel and Syria have decided to keep these negotiations secret, but everyone knows that where there is smoke, there is fire.
The Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported that Syria and Israel have reached an unofficial understanding for an Israeli withdrawal to the July 4, 1967 borders. The agreement stipulates Israeli control over the water from the Jordan River and Tiberias Lake, an arms-free zone at the border areas, and developing parts of the Golan Heights to natural parks that can be accessed by both Israelis and Syrians. Haaretz reported that this understanding is the fruit of a series of secret talks that occurred between September 2004 and July 2006 with the knowledge of Israeli officials during Sharon and Olmert's governments. Ibrahim Suleiman, an American citizen of Syrian origin, represented Syria.
There was only one request that was made by my envoy who met with Ibrahim Suleiman in Washington. He asked that the body remains of Eli Cohen, who was executed and buried in Syria 40 years ago, be returned to Israel.
In addition to this meeting, Shalom said that the Syrian president's brother, sister and brother-in-law had met with the director of the former Israeli Foreign Ministry but failed to reach tangible results because the news had leaked to the press. He did not say that the reasons were due to positions taken by the Israeli government. These recent news reports, which appeared in Haaretz's front page, generated a political debate. While members of the Israeli left demanded Israel have public peace negotiations, members from the right criticized the idea of withdrawing from the Golan Heights altogether.
I oppose the idea of an Israeli withdrawal from the Golan Heights. We will not talk with Syria's President Bashar al-Assad because he is the biggest supporter of terrorism.
The most controversial element of these news reports is the timing. While Damascus insists that peace negotiations be held in public, Israel is confused whether to respond to the Syrian demands or hold on to its previous conditions.
Publishing these news reports at this time is intended to give the impression that Syria is willing to compromise some of its positions. This in turn gives Israeli officials an opportunity to compromise their positions as well.
The Syrian peace tract has always generated controversy in Israel, and Haaretz's news reports have deepened this controversy. What is certain is that something about the Israeli-Syrian peace track is about to change. For Al Madar program, Shireen Yonis, Abu Dhabi Television, West Jerusalem.
Joining us from Damascus to shed more light on this topic is Elias Morad, chief editor of the Syrian Ba'ath newspaper and president of the Syrian Journalists Guild. Mr. Elias, Syria continues to deny any meetings between Syrian and Israeli officials, but is it really possible that all these news reports are only rumors?
ولماذا لا يمكن أن تكون مجرد شائعات؟ أليست إسرائيل هي التي
Why can't these reports be rumors? Hasn't Israel been fabricating rumors about peace talks between Syrian and Israeli officials for more than 10 years?
مسؤولين إسرائيليين ومسؤولين سوريين وثبت في النهاية عدم صحة أي من هذه
It turns out that none of these fabricated rumors that were leaked by Israeli newspapers were true. I think that some of what was said in Haaretz's report shows that there is an internal Israeli problem and that the Israeli government is facing pressure from certain countries to make peace.
Mr. Elias, why did Haaretz publish this news report at this time in particular?
You should pose this question to the Israelis. I believe that these news reports reflect an Israeli attempt to use the Syrian-Israeli peace talks to achieve gains in the international Israeli struggle for power. Internal Israeli problems emerged after the Israeli defeat in South Lebanon. This weak Israeli government is facing international pressure to extend its arms for peace and respond to peace pleas. Therefore, I believe that the Israeli government has decided to leak these news reports to show that it has been trying to make peace with Syria, which will help it deal with its internal demands for peace. Amidst anticipation over the results of the inner Palestinian dialogue, a research institute attempted to project the next political phase in Palestine. A survey group tried to sense Palestinians' views following a state of tension that ended when, after difficult negotiations, Fatah and Hamas had agreed to prohibit internal fighting. The group released its initial projections if general legislative elections were to be held soon in accordance to the current political map.
What will happen if Palestinian presidential and legislative elections were held early? Will Hamas remain in power, or will Fatah return to power? Citizens are asking these questions daily after President Mahmoud Abbas called for holding elections as a way out of the current crisis and after negotiations to form a national unity government failed. So what are they saying?
Most people want Fatah more than Hamas.
Perhaps Hamas will win. Perhaps.
Both sides are bad, because both sides have negative aspects about them.
These developments form the basis for an opinion poll that was conducted by the Far East Consultant Company, which released its results showing that the Fatah movement would win by 40% of the votes if parliamentary elections were to be held early. Hamas would receive 23% of the votes. How could we read into these results?
Opinion polls are like French perfume. It is good for smelling, but not for tasting. Opinion polls in Palestine have not proven their credibility, whether during the legislative elections in the past or even now. There are discrepancies, thus we cannot rely on them. What we are seeing on the ground is that there is a balance of power. There are no major differences.
Another notable point about this opinion poll is that 51% of the respondents believe that Hamas must change its position towards Israel, while 39% of respondents reject this idea.
Actually, many statements being made by the Hamas leadership indicate that there is some kind of change or flexibility. For example, Meshal's statements about acknowledging the presence of Israel.
Whatever projections this opinion poll makes will remain inside the voting booths until elections are held, and such elections will be the only and most definite way to verify the credibility of such polls.
And the remaining time till the Paris 3 conference is to convene on January 25, and to move things forward in the country, swapped in the political deadlock, two movements were noticed. The first is characterized by attempts to resume dialogue as witnessed yesterday in a meeting between a delegation representing House Speaker Nabih Berri and former President Amin Gemayel. The second movement, however, was characterized by a threat from Hezbollah of possible escalation, thus hinting to a possible fracture in the line of the opposition. Follow this report.
A surprising move was witnessed yesterday by the political bureau of the Amal movement, who headed to a meeting with former President Amin Gemayel. Gemayel later on described the meeting as positive. He told the Lebanese daily An-Nahar that during the meeting, both sides deployed efforts to come up with constructive solutions for the current crisis in Lebanon. Gemayel added that there were also mediations, ideas and initiatives being presented to Lebanon from neighboring countries that would be used to help diffuse the tension. The former president said that some ideas were laid agreed down, but were not going to be discussed in public, and each party would discuss it with its relative side, as each side was committed with a certain party. Amal's ally Hezbollah was, however, thinking on a different note, pursuing its threat of escalation. Sources close to Hezbollah told An-Nahar that the group was not yet been briefed on the meeting, adding that the attempt of communication between Hezbollah and Jmayil did not succeed. The same sources, however, said that the leadership of the opposition was studying intensively a different type of movement that would send to the government a tough message that would hurt it, and thus making it give up to the demands of the opposition. The opposition, however, refused to set any timeline for this move. For its part, the majority forces welcomed the trials of Jmayil and Birre and said that this move fits into the internal dialogue that was needed in this country. On another note, a high-level source from the March 14 alliance was surprised from the news that was broadcasted on Hezbollah's Al Manar TV channel, claiming that the majority decided to hold a parliamentary session at the end of this month at Biel, headed by Vice House Speaker Farid Mkari, to approve of the draft resolution of Tribunal of the International Character. The March 14 source described this news item as a creation that revealed that the opposition had no more reasons to escalate, so they had to use their imagination to create alibis. The source explained that convening to such session was not possible at all.
أعلنت مصادر أمنية وطبية عراقية مقتل 17 شخصا.
Iraqi medical and security sources announced that 17 people were killed and 33 others were injured when a booby-trapped car exploded in a crowded market in Sadr city. In a separate incident, the Iraqi police said that Haifa Street, located in the heart of Baghdad, was shaken by a mortar shell explosion.
قتل 10 أشخاص وأصيب 42 بينهم عدد من عناصر الشرطة في هجوم انتحاري بشاحنة مفخخة بالقرب من مركز للشرطة.
In addition, 10 people were killed and 42 others were injured, including a number of police officers, when a suicide bomber drove his booby-trapped truck into the police station in the heart of Kirkuk city.
أن عددا من المباني انهار وألحقت أضرار بأكثر من 20 منزلا فضلا عن تدمير عدد كبير من السيارات. وأوضحت الشرطة أن عددا من الضحايا.
According to security sources, the suicide bomber drove his car into the walls of the police station. The police said that a number of nearby homes collapsed and that more than 20 homes and many cars were damaged. They also said that some of the victims are still trapped underneath the ground.
يتركز معظم جنوده في جنوبي البلاد ذي الغالبية الشيعية.
The American President George Bush said that the way in which the former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein was executed looked like an act of revenge, which makes stopping sectarian violence in Iraq more difficult. He told the American PBS television station that he felt comfortable with the trial of Saddam Hussein and his 2 aides who were hanged recently. Bush, however, said that the Iraqi government was not professional in the way it arranged for the execution of Saddam.
But then, when it came to execute him, it looked like it was kind of a revenge killing, and it sent a mixed signal to the American people and the people around the world. And it just goes to show that this is a government that still has got some maturation to do, which makes it harder for me to make the case to the American people that this is a government that does want to unify the country and move forward. The Saddam execution, however, was an important moment in some ways because it closed a terrible chapter and gives the unity government a chance to move forward.
Many voices have been raised in the recent past, calling out for help due to the depressing situation that surrounds the province of Bikar and threatens the population with increasing illnesses and diseases due to the lack of adequate social services and appropriate hygienic standards. This report, prepared by our colleague Ghaith Hamid, sheds light on this new catastrophe.
The street
of Safeh in the province of Bikar is another scene which plagues the lives of Iraqi residents. Tens of widows who live in houses made of mud are facing the hardships of the winter in the region of Roof, an area that was used as a garbage dump in the past.
As for our economical situation, you can see for yourselves. We do not have schools or work. This has been our home for the last 15 years with no source of income. Our houses, you can see, are made of corrugated metal and mud.
More than 200 people live there, and it remove a helping hand that will wipe away this daily suffering and relocate them to more accommodating areas.
I've been living here for 10 years. No water, no electricity, no blankets, no work. And these are our houses made of corrugated metal and mud. When the wind blows, water gets in through our makeshift roofs.
The lack of services was obvious to the families living in that area. The lack of drinking water forces women to bring it from surrounding areas. As far as electricity, the electrical poles were substituted with wooden sticks instead of metal to ensure that electricity will flow to the homes.
Honestly, our area is in very bad shape. Cars cannot get through, even if we have a sick person. The electricity lines lay on these wooden poles, which, of course, we made with our bare hands. No spare parts, no gas, no petroleum. Our homes are made of mud. If it rains, that is it. They'll all be gone.
The residents of this street have found a source of income in the garbage that surrounds them. Everybody there works around the clock to earn a living, and the women replace oil with garbage.
I collect black and white fabrics for its thread. I have an old man at home to support who is bedridden.
Despite their leaders' knowledge of the widow's suffering, it still increases day by day. Promises have become nothing more than promises, far from reality and closer to dreams.
من ذقار غيث حامد قناة السومرية.
Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad says Muslims and regional nations should support one another. In an exclusive interview with the Al Arabiya TV network, Ahmadinejad touched upon the role that regional states play in Iraq and said, countries in the region are Muslim and have common interests and viewpoints, but others have come here from outside the Middle East. On Iran's nuclear fuel cycle, the president said Tehran will press ahead with its activities as planned under the IAEA supervision. The president also said Iran has no problem for talks with Washington if held fairly. Secretary of Iran's National Security Council Ali Larijani says the U.S. and Britain have misgivings over regional nations remaining united. He told reporters after meeting with Iraqi National Security Advisor Shirvan Va'ali that the White House and London have always tried to raise concerns over a make-believe enemy in the region, but regional countries, including Iran and Saudi Arabia, should go into action to counter their ploys. The top Iraqi official, in turn, rejected U.S. accusations against Iranian consulate staffers in northern Iraq and said Iran is instrumental in maintaining security in the region. The British Parliament has announced that Iran is not the enemy of the British Parliament and people. A number of British parliamentarians adopted a resolution on Wednesday against the propaganda campaign aimed at making out that Iran is an enemy. The move is a reaction to a media blitz over the past weeks aimed at launching a war of nerves against Tehran's civilian nuclear program to make out that Iran is a hostile nation.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.